Hello, welcome back to Press Review for today, Friday the 15th of November from Levant TV in London. Let's start now with headlines from papers here in the UK. The Guardian leads its front page with a story on undercover police targeting students as it reports on an activist being offered cash for information about Cambridge University protesters. It also reports on Boris Johnson being accused of gross insensitivity and dodging responsibility after he suggested that the deaths of 5 cyclists on the streets of London over the last 9 days underlined the need for bike users to obey laws of the road. The Independent leads its front page with a picture of Prime Minister David Cameron in India before he heads to Sri Lanka for Commonwealth meetings. It also reports on council top be given powers to ban peaceful protests on grounds that they might annoy nearby residents. The Daily Telegraph leads its front page with a look on the shake-up of GP services, hailing the return of proper family doctors. It says Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt has thrashed out a deal to stop GPs opting out of providing out-of-hours coverage. It also reports on house prices to rise across the UK by 7% in 2014 and 5% in 2015 and features a picture of Prince Charles and Camilla as the Prince of Wales celebrates his 65th birthday in Colombo. The Times also heads its front page taking a look at the shake-up in GP services as it reports that doctors will be forced to reveal their pay in order to help patients judge whether they offer value for money. It also reports on Princess Anne's suggestion that a market for horse meat might reduce the number of equine neglect cases, noting that she is one of Britain's best-known horse lovers. The Times front page also features a picture of Taylor Swift as the singer opens the Victoria's Secret fashion show in New York. Now let's take a look at the top stories in the Middle East. As reports emerge of Geneva II bid date being set in December, let's take a look at the continuing crisis in Syria. Moscow's Russia Today takes a look at Russian President Vladimir Putin's conversation with Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. In the article, Putin calls Assad on Geneva II, chemical weapons and persecution of Christians. The article says for the first time since 2011, the Russian and Syrian presidents spoke on the phone to discuss developments in the Syria crisis. Vladimir Putin called Bashar al-Assad about the Geneva II peace talks and the destruction of Syria's chemical stockpile. It says the Russian president said he hopes that major Syrian opposition groups will take a constructive approach and participate in the peace conference in Geneva. Putin told President Assad he was satisfied with Syria's cooperation with the UN. The article continues to say that Putin said he was concerned with purposeful persecution of Christians and other religious minorities by extremist groups in Syria. He said that Russia hopes the Syrian government will do everything possible to relieve the suffering of the civilian population and to restore peace. In regards to President Assad, Russia Today says Assad thanked the Russian government for aiding the Syrian people, and the two presidents confirmed they intend to foster bilateral relations further. Taking a look at the position for Geneva talks, it says that while Russia has been pushing the international community for months to start the talks, and the Syria government has repeatedly said it is ready to participate without preconditions, Western powers are still struggling to bring the opposition groups to the negotiation table. Morocco World News takes an analytic look at the crisis in Syria in the article, Syria the target of wrong analysis from West and East. Writer Omar al-Muqdad begins with a look at the journalist Michael Weiss interview. Weiss analyzes the situation in Syria. Muqdad says all of a sudden we hear analysis of this kind all over the places, even amongst Syrians, which is in fact spread by the opposition and not supported by any evidence. Muqdad notes that the Syrian revolution started on March 18, 2011, peaceful and took the form of peaceful civil demonstrations and sometimes general strikes, adding that 6 million civilians joined this green movement according to the Syrian Coordination Committee, 80% of those between the age of 14 and 60 years old. Taking a look at the current situation, Muqdad notes that the Syrians who are fighting on the ground today are less than 80,000 according to some surveys, and between 150 to 200,000 foreign fighters came from outside for jihad. Baghdd says now that the question is, if that was the Syrian people's choice, then where have the 6 million protesters gone? Why they don't pick up arms and join? And last but not least, what is it, the FSA? Baghdd says this leads us directly to the answer that it was not the Syrian people's choice, but rather a choice that was made from outside the country. It was pushed out by the media and was implanted in the people's heads by thousands of wrong analysis and reports. He notes even if it was the choice of a few thousand, that does not give legitimacy to the situation. A few thousand cannot rule a whole country. That's what we call hijacking a revolution. Baghdd adds that the revolution was hijacked by some regional powers like Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Turkey, with the full support by the US and the UK and some other countries, all with the intention to turn the country into what is called self-destruction. It also serves the purpose of reducing the Iranian influence in the Middle East region, even if it's going to cost the destruction of Syria. Baghdd concludes that what is happening now on the ground has nothing to do with the popular revolution, saying it is an attempt to force the civilians in the liberated areas to live under Sharia law without their consent and decide the future of Syria without the Syrians' will. Referring back to Weish's analysis, Baghdd says this analysis, which claims to understand the situation in Syria, is only feeding the propaganda and giving these controlling groups more power to continue in their game. This is a fight, and only the Syrian people are paying the price. Erdogan and Barzani are to meet in the Kurdish majority province of Diyarbakir in Turkey's southeast this weekend. We take a look at what the papers are saying about the outcomes of this meeting. Writing for Al Monitor, Turkish analyst Fahim Tastikin discusses the Ankara-Baghdad-Erbil triangle in an article headlined, "Turkey returns to balance in Baghdad-KRG ties." According to Tastikin, the collapse of Turkey's zero problems with the neighbors policy could be traced back to Ankara's effort to bring the Sunnis to power following the Iraqi elections of 2010. The Baghdad-Ankara link was severed by Turkey's developing strategic relations with the Kurdistan Regional Government, KRG, over the past 3 years. Tastikin claims that now the Justice and Development Party, AKP, government is working back to repair its collapse as part of plans to bring Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki to Turkey to make a fresh start. Iraqi Foreign Minister Hoshar Zebari was received in Ankara. Then Davutoglu paid a 2-day visit to Iraq to discuss the details of the proposed Maliki visit. Tastikin sees that these gestures don't offer a guarantee to end the tensions of the past 3 years. They do make it easier to draw up a new roadmap for bilateral relations. Tastikin argues that this new roadmap requires the crafting of new balances in the Baghdad-Erbil-Ankara triangle. The AKP government, as tensions grew with Baghdad, developed bilateral relations with the KRG with exaggerated strategic ambitions, both to benefit from economic opportunities offered by the region and to make use of Erbil's influence over the Kurdish process in Turkey. Turkey feels the necessity of maintaining coordination with Erbil while mending its bridges with Baghdad. Tastikin points out that right at this critical juncture, Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan is to host Masoud Barzani, the president of the KRG, at Diyarbakir November 16th and 17th. Erdogan, uneasy with the stalling of the solution process with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, will try to convey his message through Barzani to diminish the BDP's role in the Kurdish issue. Tastikin goes on to say that Erdogan actually wants to kill 4 birds with 1 stone. The first is to get the stalled strategic projects between Ankara and Erbil moving. The second is to use Barzani to influence the developments in Rojava, Syrian Kurdistan. The third is to gain more maneuvering room in the stalled solution process with the PKK. Finally, he wants to attract Barzani's supporters in Turkey to the AKP and defeat the BDP in Diyarbakir. The writer continues to explain that any votes the AKP gets from the Kurds come from a conservative religious base that Barzani can influence. But given the disappointment of the Kurds with the solution process, the AKP's hostility to Rojava and the Kurdish anger over the embargo Barzani imposed on it, a successful election in Diyarbakir may not all be that significant. As for the peace process, Barzani may play a facilitator role, but the government has no real option except to talk to the PKK and the BDP. Tashtekeen adds Ankara's policy of exerting pressure on Rojava through Barzani has not produced any results as of now, and there are no signs this situation will change. Tashtekeen sees that there will be heavy political agenda behind the visions of Erdogan and Barzani bound to create tensions among the Kurds of Turkey. Including the future of oil and gas pipelines that will enable the Kurdistan region to export directly, the involvement of the central government in these projects, electricity sales to northern Iraq by Turkish companies, Carter and Aqsa, the solution process with the PKK, and new developments in Rojava towards the declaration of an autonomous Kurdish administration. However, Tashtekeen believes that the most important agenda item will be the energy lines from Kurdistan to Turkey, a topic that upsets Baghdad and disturbs Washington. Tashtekeen states that there is also talk of a project that would allow an annual flow of Turkey of 10 billion cubic meters of natural gas from Iraqi Kurdistan's Miran and Binabawi fields. He quotes an official speaking to Reuters about this line saying, "The four pillars of the agreement are natural gas, oil, fields and pipelines. Technical negotiations on all of them have been completed with 100% accord." Tashtekeen claims that the Baghdad government has been reacting strongly to the KRG's independent oil exploitation operations. Baghdad has been allotting 17% of its total oil revenue to the KRG. Turkey now wants to benefit from the new pipelines before they add to Baghdad-Erbil tensions. That is why Turkey has to determine the point of convergence of interest between Barzani and Maliki. Tashtekeen also adds that the US dialogue with Iran, miscalculations in the Syria crisis, Turkey becoming a part of sectarian conflict as never before, and the reality that strategic projects cannot be implemented unless regional calm prevails, as observed in northern Iraq, are forcing Turkey to take a fresh look at its foreign policy. Tashtekeen sees that these most crucial issues in how to set up a new balance in the Ankara-Erbil-Baghdad triangle. To conclude, Tashtekeen states it is not really a coincidence that Turkey-Iraq dialogue resumed after Maliki's Washington visit. The last 3 years have illustrated that both Turkey and Iraq lose from tensions. This may encourage Erdogan and Maliki to agree on common interests. If they succeed in that, then they will be no losers. In an article headlined "Erdogan's move deepens the disintegration of the Kurds," Turkish Hurriyet daily newspaper columnist Sedat Ergin looks at the possible outcomes that are bound to be formed as a result of the Diyarbakir visit of the president of the Kurdistan Regional Government (KRG) and the chairman of the Iraqi Kurdistan Democratic Party (KDP) Masoud Barzani, from Turkish domestic politics to the future of the relations of the Kurds amongst themselves in the Middle East and to regional power equilibriums. According to Sedat Ergin, this is a major political initiative of the host Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan. With it, Erdogan has once again demonstrated that he is a politician open to unexpected political moves. However, Ergin believes that apart from the political gain Erdogan is expected to yield, there will be also serious risks. Ergin states that Barzani is a leader who has his mark on the historic gains of the Kurds in Iraq in the past 20 years, and it carries major symbolism that a personality who has this identity will be welcomed by the red carpet in Diyarbakir, the leading city of Kurdish identity in Turkey. The visit also shows how warm the relations between the Justice and Development Party and the KDP have become. Ergin points out that it is out of the question to think that Erdogan does not have some tactical expectations before the local elections and the presidential elections to be held in 2014. The AK party mostly trails behind the Peace and Democracy Party BDP in geographies where the Kurdish population is the majority. However, there are also significant numbers of Kurds who vote for the AK party. Erdogan, in cooperation with Barzani, is seeking to strengthen the conservative segments of the Kurdish electorate, as well as aiming to attract the undecided Kurds and, if possible, thaw the grassroots of the BDP. By accepting this invitation, Barzani is inevitably accepting his engagement in the domestic political equations in Turkey. Ergin sees that the fact that BDP circles are bothered by the US visit is an open indication that they are interpreting this move as a move directly against themselves. In this aspect, we can say that Erdogan is aiming to push the Kurdish political movement to a corner by taking Barzani to his side in a city that is the stronghold of the BDP. He is attempting a major challenge that carries a message for the BDP. I am not leaving this neighborhood to you. Ergin argues that Erdogan, with this Barzani move, is now in possession of a strong argument to repel those criticisms which say his commitment to the peace process has retreated. Maybe the Prime Minister wants to gain time. Ergin goes on to say that the visit has further crystallized across the region the separation and disintegration of the Kurds. We are observing today the Kurdish geography in the Middle East is witnessing an undeclared cutthroat competition between the two leaders. These two rivals are Masoud Barzani and Abdullah Öcalan. Ergin believes this rivalry is also seen today in the power struggle in northern Syria between the KDP and the Democratic Union Party, which, in line with the PKK, it is meaningful that the visit comes right after the PYD declared an interim rule in Syria the other day. In this aspect, Erdogan has put Turkey's weight on Barzani's side in the power struggle in northern Syria. The writer also sees that Barzani's arrival coincides with the phases where energy agreements between Turkey and the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan have finalized. The Diyarbakir summit may help iron out the objections of Baghdad and Washington about the pipeline projects via Turkey. To conclude, Ergin claims that one of the most noteworthy outcomes of the visit is that the alliance that has been shaping for a while between Erdogan and Barzani will be elevated to a strategic level in the Middle East power equation. The biggest unknown and risk of this step is the response that Öcalan and Kandil will give. At a time when the inaction of the PKK has matured, the response of Kandil, the mountainous area where PKK units are based, is especially important. Will it opt for a severe retaliation in the event that it sees this move as a siege move against itself, or will it stomach it? Probably the toughest question emerges here at this point. Political analyst Ahmed Al-Rubai writes for Iraqi news website Nikash an article headlined, "Let's be friends again. Turkey and Iraq plan joint security measures. Mutual visits looking in depth at the Turkey-Iraqi Kurdistan relations." According to Al-Rubai, the past months has seen, though in the previously frosty relationships between Turkey and Iraq, reasons for the detente include US pressure, billions of dollars in trade and the regional threat from extremists in neighboring Syria. Their new friendship will see more military and security cooperation and mutual visits from the nation's leaders. Al-Rubai claims that over the past 2 years there's been a serious frost over diplomatic relations between Iraq and their neighbors, Turkey. However, over the past week that has changed significantly, with the thaw brought about after Iraqi Foreign Minister Hosher Zibari visited Turkey late in October, and by a visit to Baghdad from the Turkish Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu last week. Al-Rubai sees that the relationship between the two countries has been tense for around 2 years now. This had to do with the Syrian issue, with the Iraqi government's behavior inside the country toward Iraq's Sunni Muslims, the issue of Turkish incursions into Iraq Kurdistan's territory, and last but certainly not least, the fact that Turkey has sheltered Iraqi Vice President Tariq al-Hashimi. But now Al-Rubai states that there are obviously some better reasons to let that go and make friends again. One very obvious one in financial. The Turkish government reports that their imports into Iraq were worth almost $11 billion in 2012, and Iraq's imports into Turkey were worth around $3.1 billion US. Additionally, Iraq is a significant market for Turkish contractors. Turkish firms have undertaken 779 projects in Iraq with a total value of $17.75 billion US until May 2013. Al-Rubai claimed that part of the problem for the Turkish had been that the Iraqi government had been pursuing an exclusionary policy towards them when it came to bidding for big projects in areas like power generation and oil extraction. The writer quotes Iraqi economist Abdurrahman al-Mashhadani from the Mustansiriya Center for Arab and International Studies, part of Mustansiriya University in Baghdad, agrees, saying that there are a number of regional factors that make this a particularly good time for Turkey to be doing business with Iraq, including the increasing weakness of several of Iraq's major trading partners, countries like Syria. Al-Mashhadani adds the deterioration of Syrian industry after 2012, and in particular the collapse of the Syrian industrial city Aleppo, the increasingly poor quality of Iranian-made goods and the high taxes and custom duties on goods coming into Iraq from Jordan, all of these factors will allow Turkey to increase the volume of its trade with Iraq. The writer argues that, however, there are political concerns at the play in the new rapprochement between Turkey and Iraq, namely the extremist groups fighting in Syria. This has forced Turkey to abandon its earlier approach and to rearrange its policies in line with changes in the region. Turkey has intimated its willingness to cooperate in this area, perhaps going so far as to form a joint military and intelligence operations center to deter groups like Al-Qaeda affiliates, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Khalid al-Assadi, a leading member of Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's ruling state of Law Bloc, told al-Rubai that Turkey's desire to negotiate and its strengthening of relations with Iraq is not about a sincere desire for friendship. It is because Turkey feels increasingly isolated in the region after its interference in Syria. And of course, by this, al-Assadi is not just talking about Iraq, he's also including Iran. Officially, Iraq is supposed to be neutral about the Syrian conflict. Unofficially, though, it seems as though al-Maliki's government, which has close ties to the Iranian government, one of the Syrian regime's strongest supporters, may well be supporting the Syrian regime headed by President Bashar al-Assad too. The writer refers to Hani Ashur, a former advisor to the opposition Iraqi coalition, who explained the Syrian issue has now gone beyond the direct conflict between two powers in the region. For example, an easy equation featuring Turkey versus Iran. Too many other players are now involved and the game has changed, so Turkey and Iraq are assessing all their other options. Al-Rubai points out that there is one other major factor leading to the new thaw in the Turkish-Iraqi relationship, which is the US. Al-Rubai cites Ihsan al-Shammari, a professor of political studies at Baghdad University, who believes that the US diplomatic pressure had pushed both parties to sit at one table and negotiate. There are strong strategic relations between Washington and Ankara, and the US is very close politically to Iraq. That's why the Americans have been able to push the two parties together. Of course, they're acting in their own interests, as they too are a key player in this region. Now let's take a look at the top headlines from international papers. Starting from Russia, where the Moscow Times leads its front page with the headline Shoigu Lavrov in Egypt to sell arms as they discuss the expansion of Russian and Egyptian military cooperation. The Washington Post leads its front page with the headline Obama offers an insurance fix as President Obama talks about the Affordable Care Act. The UAE's Gulf News front page leads with the headline Saudis beef up security after clashes after 5 people are arrested on suspicion of organizing a protest by illegal workers. And finally, Israel's Haaretz leads its front page with the headline Senior Minister Kerry no longer an honest broker. That was all today. I'll see you tomorrow for another press review.